Morgan, the feature writer for the Marriage Initiative. And I'm just so delighted today to introduce you to George and Tondra Gregory. The Gregorys have served as chaplains for the LA Chargers since 2017, coaching players, staff, and their families in their relationships. The authors and speakers serve as leaders of marriage at Rick Warren's Saddleback Church in Orange County, California, and founded Journey for Life Marriage Ministry. George earned a master's degree from Duke Divinity School, while Tondra holds a master's in counseling and is a nationally certified and licensed marriage and family counselor. They're featured along with 28 influential couples in the 2021 devotional Love's Letters, a collection of timeless relationship advice from today's hottest marriage experts, compiled by Scott and Leah Silveri, and have written several other books in a group study called The 5 Purposes of Marriage. George and Tondra, it is just so great to talk to you. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you so much for having us.
Yeah, we're excited.
Yeah, we're so excited.
Well, and Marriage Champions, we are talking to the Gregorys today, right at kind of the start of the NFL season. And I've got to confess, I'm a big football fan with 2 young adult sons. So it's always fun talking football. But can you explain to our Marriage Champion audiences what NFL football can possibly have to do with marriage ministry?
Yeah, well, all NFL teams are made up of coaches and players and staff that happen to be in relationships, whether they're dating or boyfriend or girlfriend, or they're married. And so we like to say whatever we're doing with our pro team is we're doing relationships, and we're trying to help them to have better relationships or more successful relationships.
Yeah. And also some of the same things that it takes to be successful or professional or elite in in professional sports, you have to apply some of those same type of mindsets and
that's right,
actions to have a successful and elite marriage as well.
Well, and too, it's the players, but I would imagine too, everyone in the organization, but particularly the players, they're kind of a unique circumstance, and they really have a lot of pressure on their marriages, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, I think, again, coaches and players, all of them have probably about the same amount. Maybe financially the players are better off, but really busy schedules, travel, being gone, long hours, that impacts all relationships, right? And so I think that in pro sports, more so than average couples, I will say everyday couples, let me say that, they have a higher demand on just the intricacies of what weighs on a marriage or tugs or brings tension to a marriage.
Yeah. And marriage is hard just under normal pressures and circumstances. And it just it's like on steroids. Marriage can be hard when you are under, the light of society, seeing everything and judging everything. That's pressure. And then, they're young, they're young. Being in that NFL too at such a young age, you don't get time to lay that foundation in your marriage before all of these demands and pressures start to impact your relationship. So
yeah,
I can only imagine. I know my favorite player, who will remain nameless, has 2 very small children, and there's a picture on Facebook. There's at least one, if not every single day. And I'm not a huge, it just comes up on my feed because I liked his team.
Yeah.
And, there's his little wife and there's his little kids, and they're right front and center. So that would be, so far he's handled it pretty gracefully, but, like you said, they're young. And anyway, well, how did you get started with doing this? Because you all are chaplains, but that's not how you started. Tell me how you got started, and then we'll even go back farther and go into your whole journey. Because it didn't start with the Chargers.
Right. Yeah. Our journey with the NFL started with the New York Jets. So we started a website called our marriage ministry, Journey for Life. And the first organization that reached out to us was the New York Jets. They want us to help do marital support for their team, like pre-marriage counseling, dinner date nights, just sort of like all things couples related. And that's where we really got our start. And then you want to tell them about the other team?
Yes. And we have 2 New York teams. And so the New York Jet the New York Giants heard what we were doing for our couples at the Jets, and they wanted to also bring us in and do some special date nights where we would teach on marriage, and the couples will have like this full course meal, just doing some outings for their couples to help them grow in their relationship while they're in the league, which is so important because, the divorce rate after NFL athletes retire is 72%. So you can't like put your marriage and relationship on the shelf until the end of your career. It's something that you have to be working on simultaneously. As your career is growing, your marriage needs to be also growing and getting the skills you need, to help you once you retire, so that your relationship is intact and it's on solid footing. So, yeah.
Well, I love that you said the word simultaneously, because while you were providing all the couple support for both the Jets and the Giants, you were simultaneously also raising your family, but you were simultaneously also doing some other things. So let's talk about what you were doing in New York.
Yes.
Yeah, well, I think, again, we were on a pro level. We just didn't know that we were on a pro level with busy lives. Being New Yorkers, we planted a church on the Upper East Side of New York City, and that was pretty demanding. Tondra somehow found time to start her private practice in therapy right in the middle of Times Square. And then we were raising two kids that we moved from the South to the North, and getting the kids acclimated to a city lifestyle, urban lifestyle, was very much a big transition. And so we were trying to find out how to do life on a whole nother level. And yet, God met us in the mix.
Yeah. So we moved. We felt like God was leading us to New York to plant a church. And so we planted that church. And I just love to see God's fingerprints as you look back over your life, how important that step was to trust God and move to New York City, because it had a direct link to what we're doing now. Had we missed that step, it might have affected the step where we are now. So it's like God's divine footsteps, working his plan out for our lives that has brought us to this place.
God leading, just like I'm sure many of our marriage champions have I think all of us have felt the way. And it's so nice to look back, hindsight being 2020, right? And you can see, I see what you were doing, God. Well, tell us even more, obviously you have a divinity degree. How did you even get started being interested in marriage? Not every pastor is interested in marriage ministry, and you were actually, heading the church as well, right?
Yeah. Sad to say, I got interested in doing it because I didn't want to do it. I sort of tasked Tondra to come up with a pre-marriage class that would kind of take the weight off of senior pastors of the church. And so that we didn't have to do much of the heavy lifting. So it was my way to get out of doing it. But somehow I think Tondra, in what we saw as help for thousands of couples who really just didn't know how to do it on their own, that's where I really got the heart, because the Bible says that his shepherds have compassion on sheep, if you will. And for me, I thought, man, a lot of these couples started off like we started off. Like we didn't have a clue. We were making it up as we were going along, or maybe I should say we were building the airplane as we were flying it. And what we realized is that there are plans that you could have. There are ways that you could get ahead of the curve. There are coaches that are out there, if you will, to help you along your journey.
And it was like what inspired George saying we need a class is that in 1 week there were 8 couples that said, Pastor George, will you marry us? And because of our journey, how we started off, George is committed to not just the wedding, but he was saying, I want, every couple needs to be prepared for their marriage. So one of his rules were, I'm not going to marry you unless you do pre-marriage counseling. And so he knew that he couldn't do 8 couples pre-marriage counseling all at once. So that's when he said, you want to be a counselor. That's when I was working on my master's in counseling, he was like, you need to use some of that to help us build a pre-marriage class. And so so that's how the class idea was born, is for us to do a pre-marriage class. So that
yeah, but I also say that I think that it's just hard to see couples you love not want to let you down throughout the challenges of their relationship, but would be so willing to come to you in the very end to sort of get, as a pastor, your blessing that they would separate or divorce. And so we got so tired of that scenario that we said we better become a lot more proactive in helping couples to establish a solid foundation, as opposed to more of the crisis counseling towards the end of their relationship. And so that to me was trying to get ahead of the curve as opposed to responding to what was happening.
And that was part of even your own journey as being young marrieds. And you said a lot of the resources back in those days weren't really widely known, but you found one resource right early in your marriage. And then talk about that, because then you got really inspired to bring others.
Definitely. So George and I, when we first started off, we just didn't have a plan for how we were to take the two uniquely God-designed individuals and become one, right? I know that's what the Bible says, but it's like, how do we become one, right? And so just that journey of trying to figure that out we were just bumping heads, and we just couldn't figure out how to make the two become one, to operate as that well-oiled machine that it needs to.
But we specifically started going to a conference called Weekend to Remember, Family Life. And we didn't know we needed help. Well, no, we knew we needed help. We just didn't know where to go. And so we happened upon that. And we went for 7 years straight.
I love that.
And we knew every blank from a third year on that they were going to make us to fill in. But we had to do it because we just needed to keep the cycle of repeating and practicing, right? Which that's what pros do, is they practice 3 or 4 times or 5 times a week to become the elite athletes that they need to become.
It's not a one and done. We prepared ourselves for marriage. We took a class at the beginning and now we know everything we need to know. But it is that habit, like George is saying, it's a cycle, it's an intentionality to make sure that you keep working on your marriage. Even though it was just that one conference, it was the same information. It was just that habit of saying we're prioritizing growing in our marriage together every year.
And then you started taking people, right?
And we were like, every couple needs this. Come on, guys, come with us.
Well, then fast forward, you're back in New York, and you really realized you as you were planting the church, you had a heart too for the lost, and you realized, right, that this could be your end to reach people. So let's talk about that premarital class you were working on.
Oh, definitely.
Sure. Yeah. Well, we didn't want to just be a church in the 4 walls. And strategically, we said, how do we want to do outreach? I mean, every church that's a church plant wants to do outreach. And we said, well, let's do it in our wheelhouse, our passion, which was couples. And, interesting enough, New Yorkers will try to consolidate to save money. And we found that a lot of people were living together in relationships, saying that they were saving money, and they didn't have a clue how to be married or how to do it successfully, just because of the picture of marriage has changed so much. And we look at society, the statistics aren't as good as they used to be. And so we wanted to sort of target that. And we started that pre-marriage class in New York that we had previously started in North Carolina. And I was kind of blown away with the response of New Yorkers, that some of them, that they would tell us, hey, we don't know about this Jesus thing, but we really believe in you guys because you take time for our relationship. And so we had hundreds of couples that were unchurched, unsaved, that would come through that class and really get the tools that they needed to really figure out how to be married, how to do it successfully. And then many of them took the plunge and said, will you marry me? And actually, we know plenty of success stories with that.
Yeah. It definitely is a great outreach because everybody wants to be successful in their relationship, right?
Mhm.
And a lot of times you just don't know how to do it and you need that support. And even though we were a church offering these classes, people felt like, oh yeah, this does help. We need to know this. We'll take what we can
Sure.
take. It's like George, grandma used to say, eat the meat and spit out the bones is what they thought. But you get in that environment, you start learning about God. And
Mhm.
some people even, gave their lives to Christ or wanted to go to the church and learn more. So we feel like marriage ministry is a great outreach because I think that's what we universally have in common is we all want to be in love and we
Yeah.
want to have that partnership. It doesn't matter what your background is
Sure.
as far as faith, but that's our universal goals.
Yeah, there's this saying that says that people don't care how much you know till they know how much you care.
Mhm.
And I think we were just working that out
Yeah.
in a practical way, showing couples that we care for you guys, that
Yeah.
we want to see you have a successful relationship.
Mhm.
And once they knew that we cared,
Mhm.
I think they were more open to whatever steps that it took, right?
Yeah.
And if that meant a walk with Jesus, or if that meant, a small group, or if that meant, going through some counseling, they were more apt to listen.
Right.
Because they knew in the end that we really just wanted them to win in their marriage.
Mhm.
Well, marriage champions, right there.
Yeah.
If you needed to take a quote and to show this to your senior pastor about why marriage ministry is important in your church, that would be a testimonial right there from the one who has been right exactly where you were.
Yeah.
So, and Tondra, you had a lady that she'd been living with her. It was such a great story.
Yeah. Yeah. So in the first class that we ever did in New York City, we had a couple that had been living together for 10 years and they got engaged in the middle of the midst of the sessions of classes. And I asked him, well, what changed for you? Like, what made you propose after 10 years of living together? He said he just never had a model for what a husband was supposed to be. He didn't know if he could be a husband or what those expectations were. And while he was going through the class, he was like, oh, that's what a husband does. And that's what a marriage is. Okay, I can do that. And so he proposed and they got married by the time the class ended. And every time I would run into them anywhere, she would always say, thank you so much. We're so happy. Thank you. And this is why we do what we do, because you just never know what struggles or what obstacles people have. One, to make the decision to get married, and two, how do you work out marriage?
Yeah, I think there's so many churches that miss this aspect, and that is discipleship, right? Like discipling people, it means to be in relationship with them, to teach them relationally how to walk with Jesus. And many times I think churches just really, think that it's only preaching the gospel and then somehow they find Jesus and the rest of their life is just healed and they'll never have any problems. And that's not everyday life. And so we look at, we preach the gospel, but we disciple people how to be in relationship one to another. And so our prayer is that, every church would have a marriage ministry that looks at it as not, oh, we have to do this, but no, we get to show people how to be in relationship, how to love each other, how to forgive one another, how to get past tough moments and to win and to say, man, we're overcomers. And so I think that there's so many times that we can lose sight of that's a calling that Christ gives us to create and make disciples.
Yeah.
I love that. Well, as we were talking earlier, you mentioned about how God led you steps on the way.
Yeah.
And now, obviously, you're not in New York.
Right.
Let's talk about that journey and how you got where you are, because a lot of what you're doing now is in California.
Yeah. Yeah.
But we need to know how you got there.
Yeah.
Well, interesting. I think the more detailed story is that we pastored Coach Anthony Lynn and his wife while they were coaches in New York City for the Jets. And then Coach Lynn went to be with the Bills. And I had no clue that the church that we started was going to be his home church, their home church. And we at some point knew that our time was up. We spent 10 years on the mission field in New York City, and we had handed the church off, and we were planning to come home to North Carolina to take care of my father. But at that same time, Coach Lynn was leaving the Bills because he got the new position out here with the LA Chargers, and somebody reintroduced us as a possibility. And long story short was the particular person just put 4 or 5 resumes before Coach Lynn. He looked at those resumes and he says, "Wait a minute, one of these resumes says George and Tondra Gregory. You know, they're my pastors from New York City, and if they want to come, there are no interviews. They've got the role." And so for us, it's never been about us positioning ourselves to be a chaplain. More so, it was the heart to pray to God to sort of say, "Lord, if you want to use us on some of the most hard reach demographics in relation to our passion, which was marriage, then do so," right? And there's no better place to do that than New York City. There's no better place to do that in the NFL with 70% divorce rate after retirement. But then where we live in Orange County, we found out once we landed here that the divorce rate is 72%. And so it's more about where we're positioning ourselves for God to use us in the passion and the gifting that he's created us. And then we can figure out how to do it in the best light. And I think we found what we're supposed to be doing.
Yeah. And I love, with each step, I feel like that God prepared us, because ministry in North Carolina looked very different in New York City, because North Carolina is like in the Bible Belt, and it's, George always says everybody knows Jesus in North Carolina. They might not have a relationship with him, but they know who he is.
It's not good news.
Yeah. And then New York City was an unchurched culture,
less than 3% Christian.
Less than 3% Christian when we planted the church. So it was more like you had to build a relationship and start to, like George says, discipleship came first before evangelism. Where in the South, it was evangelism, before discipleship. So we learned how to work with unchurched people group or more secularized area, which prepares us for ministry and outreach in the NFL as well, working with the Los Angeles Chargers. So I just felt like that was a cool, I just feel like God will prepare you for each step. Even with us having that heart for marriage and bringing us to Orange County with the divorce rate being 72%, each step kind of takes you to that next level. So now we feel like, we're on the front lines of doing marriage ministry in the most decimated areas, which is Orange County and the NFL, in the NFL.
Yeah. I was thinking about your journey and thinking about, New York City and Orange County don't look anything alike, but yet they both share that dearth of Christians, broken marriages. They have those things in common. And then God put you there. And then you started obviously with Coach Lynn and the Chargers, and he was very good to you, right? He really wanted you to be successful and set you up well with the team. And then you also connected with another kind of influential person in California.
Well,
champions will recognize. Why don't you tell us how that happened?
Well, so we moved out here again in faith, and we didn't have friends, we didn't have family, and we didn't have a church home, and yet we knew we were called to come. And one of the pastors that somebody recommended that we get to come and speak to the Chargers was Pastor Rick Warren. And I literally, man, we just kind of hit it off in a relationship with Pastor Rick and Kay the first time we saw him. I mean, I remember the big. So Pastor Rick is known for his hugs that he gives, to people. And the first time he met me, somebody told him I was the Chargers chaplain, and he says, "You know what? You don't get just a hug, you get a kiss." and he kissed me on my cheek, and I told him, "Pastor, listen, I didn't get down in New York City like that. I'm not coming out here to conservative Orange County, California, to do that with a dude." And so we kind of laughed that off. But really, Pastor Rick has a heart for leaders, and to teach people their purpose. And so I get kind of like giddy because Pastor Rick often calls and says, "Hey, are you going to invite me this year to come speak to the Chargers?" And that was sort of the key that started our relationship. But little did we know that I don't think we would have ever said it in those terms before we met Pastor Rick, that marriage was our purpose. We would say it's our calling or our career that we want to do, but not a sort of a God ordained purpose. And he gave us that language to realize that it's okay to be authentically us and to be wired to sort of think through these issues or to have that passion on our hearts every single day. And man, just being in a relationship with he and Kay have just really given us the NFL, and then that relationship with Rick has really given us a larger platform, if you will, to speak at some of the largest churches in America. You know, not to brag, it's really to give glory to God, you know, to see where our heart for marriage has taken us, but to speak on stage with Pastor Joel Osteen and Lakewood, to Gateway with Pastor Robert Morrison, and then to with Rick Warren at Saddleback. It's just really been, you know, it's been really like, man, kind of overwhelming at where God's placed us, but man, it's been really good to see, man, God's anointing is there, and God is using us in incredible ways.
Yeah, we would have never known when we started that pre-marriage class back in North Carolina. We could have never seen that this was what God was really. Even take that back. Like we feel like God has a sense of humor that we're even doing marriage ministry, because we just messed up so royally to start off our marriage, right?
Well, it's Tondra messed up so royally.
You see, we still need to work on some things, but but starting off, it's like we just feel like we're a picture of God's grace and how God used our pain and struggles to give us a platform and a heart for couples. We never could have known where it would lead. We were just on mission to follow God and to help as many couples as we can. And it's almost like God took us from minoring in marriage ministry to majoring in marriage ministry, being a major impact for couples.
I even say, like, I just want to encourage some of your viewers that maybe they're in a tough place where they don't feel like they're being used in the location that they are. Maybe their heart is like, man, they're not seeing the fruition of that. Just keep plowing. Just keep asking God to put you in those places where you're going to be able to help to reach people. Because I mean, for us, I mean, you know, we got, you know, our social media following now, and we actually pray for people online. And the interesting thing that happened just the other day was somebody asked me to do a video prayer for them, for their son-in-law that was in ICU on a ventilator, and just really an infection in his kidneys and lungs. And I did a private prayer, sent it to him, and they posted it online. And so when they posted it, I reposted it. But my followers started to pray for that young man as well, who happens to have a wife and kids. And 4 days later, we got a call that that young man was out of ICU. He was off his ventilator. He was hugging his kids. He was no longer in threat of losing his life, all because just a simple tool of prayer and building a platform and just walking through the doors that God just continuously allows you. And so, but we didn't always feel like our pastors or people from the church supported what we wanted to do. And so that's what I'm trying to encourage your listeners is, wherever you are, be faithful to where you are, but don't forget that God can put you on a platform. He can use you in higher places. He can use you maybe in some places that you don't think that he could. And yet, because of your faithfulness, I believe that God is going to reach millions of families through the people that he's called to reach those families.
And I just like to add, it's not even about your perfection, that you do everything right.
That's good.
We were in our journey, and we wanted to bring people along that journey for the people who were struggling with the same things. So it doesn't always have to be. I feel like sometimes couples are like, oh, I can't help other couples because we got our own struggles. And no, God can use you as you are also being healed and you're also learning, you can always bring couples alongside of you. And I feel like that's what our journey has shown us, because even when we were going to the weekend to remember, it was never just about our marriage. It was always like, if we need this,
Right.
every couple might need this. So let's just help as many couples as we can find the resources that they need. And that's what I love about what you're doing with your marriage initiative. It's just like, how can we make it easy for these families and these couples to get the resources and make the connections that they need to grow in their relationship? So,
well, I love that you brought up the word journey, because that's your ministry. It's Journey for Life. And also you mentioned Rick Warren's purpose. And I want to make sure that we help our marriage champions find you have a group study called The 5 Purposes of Marriage. And that's something that they can avail themselves of and click on. And how is the best way for them to find that?
Yes.
Yeah, well, like we all do every day, you go to Amazon and you can, search the 5 purposes for marriage, and it'll come up as a study with us and Saddleback. And you can buy the workbook. It comes with a very nicely laid out workbook with instructions and how-tos. And the workbook will actually lead you to the videos that we did. So it's a 5-week or 5-session video curriculum for couples or small groups that you can get. I think it's 15 minutes or less, teachings from Tondra and I on 5 different topics that are about why God made marriage. And we're really excited about that project.
Yeah. I love that. And you're also working on a new book coming out, a marriage game plan.
Yes. So we're excited about our book that we are working on. We just signed a book deal with David C. Cook. And our it's combining 2 of our passions, which is marriage ministry and NFL chaplaincy, right? And so we get to marry the 2. And so we're using a lot of the things that working with professional
Tell
athletes.
them the name of the book.
Oh, the book is The Marriage Game Plan. So we want to help couples get their game plan, and we use a lot of our football terminology or sports terminology to help paint the picture and make it relevant. You know, George is always trying to make sure that the men, the husbands and the fathers are not left out of marriage tools and practical skills. So we're always trying to make sure that we include our men, our husbands, and our fathers in helping them grow in their skills.
I think that's important because, again, I think, any marriage practitioner out there would know that it's easy to get the wives there. They want to go to stuff like this, but man, they drag their husbands most of the time. But I believe it's because of the approach. And I think if more people thought about it from a man's perspective, just to make sure there's an examples that the man gets or that men resonate with, I think that they will. And so our approach to doing that is called the Marriage Game Plan, where each chapter we teach you how to build your game plan, right? Like winning teams, NFL teams or pro teams, they don't just win haphazardly. They've got a plan. They've got a playbook. They've got rules of engagement. They've got things that they commit themselves to do. They practice every day. And so we're going to give you a lot of those simple, practical things that we've learned from the pros on how to do it in your marriage. And we like to say, why have a good marriage when you can have an elite marriage? Right? Why have an average marriage when you can be a pro at your marriage? But some of that really means that you need a coach. And for all practical purposes, Tondra and I, my team actually calls me coach. Some of the coaches call me coach because they realize that we're relationship coaches, we're life coaches, we're mentor coaches. And for a lot of people out there that might be struggling, you just need a coach. You need someone in your corner that's not afraid to tell you what to do or what technique to stop doing so that you can win in your relationship.
Oh, well, George and Tondra, thank you so much for being here. It's always so much fun talking to you. I know for one, I will not watch a professional football game in the same way. Watching the Chargers, I'll be looking for you. But thank you so much. I know our marriage champions have really gotten a lot out of this, and look forward to looking for your resources.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you for
it's
having
been
us.
A pleasure to get to know you and your initiative, and thank you for doing this.
Thank you.
It's great. And Marriage Champions, if you'd like more information about the Gregorys and their ministry, you can always find us at marriageinitiative.org.